Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this ATA presentation. Tonight we have a great presenter and a great topic, exploring industrial wartime and social communication through typewriter philately with Dr. Michelle Bresso. Michelle Bresso is a retired speech communication professor. She will show us her extensive collection typewriter philately and explore the significance of typewriters in history, culture, and technology. A lifelong philatelist, Michelle is active in many philatelic organizations and recently joined the ATA board. And I may add, we love having her.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I am going to take a minute here to share my screen, and then I will adjust my view so you can see it a little bigger. Let's do that. There we go. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Eric. I'm really appreciative. And thanks to all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join me tonight. I really am grateful. And thank you for letting me share about my love of typewriters. So you see from this wonderful cover, this is a commercial cover from 1917 by the Dearborn Typewriter Company, showing an Underwood typewriter. And you can see that typewriter philately can be very alluring. Some of these wonderful old typewriters are almost mystical. We wonder how they came about and who used them and how they got here. What did people do with them? And of course, we know more about what's happened in recent years, but I'd like to talk a little bit about my collection. As a matter of fact, I'm going to show you and share a variety of things. So by way of preview, we're going to talk tonight first about the collection itself. I do have a fairly extensive collection. I can't possibly show it all to you in a presentation. So I'm going to talk about the range of materials that I have, just to give you some examples of the kinds of things in this topical collection. I am going to talk a bit about the very early history of the early typewriter in a couple of ways. And then I'm going to focus on how the typewriter changed communication. And so we'll take a look at that. And finally, we'll take a nod to how typewriters have come forward in history and what they represent on stamps today. What you see before you is another commercial cover, this one from 1900, showing an Oliver typewriter. You're going to see another one of those coming up in another setting. And below, some poster stamps from Spain. And these are little advertisements for typewriter ribbons in Valencia, Spain. So I'll show you quite a few different materials. Let's take a look at what some of those are. Well, of course, no philatelic collection, topical or not, would be complete without the stamps. And I do have typewriters on many stamps. Once you start realizing that there are quite a few out there, you can see that just the stamps alone can be fairly extensive. For example, in the upper left, you see the top portion of a mini sheet that was produced in 2020 by France. They issued this to commemorate Frederick Dard, who passed away in 2000. He was a mystery writer, a French mystery and crime writer. And I managed to land the upper portion of this mini sheet because you can see there in the selvage, not only that information about him, but the typewriter in the selvage as well as on the stamp itself. To its right, a 2012 Hong Kong issue that actually was a set of 6 commemorating 150 years of stamp issuance in Hong Kong, but they did so in this set by simultaneously showing the evolution of written communication, including the quill pen and the fountain pen. And of course, there was a typewriter in there And I really love this particular stamp. In the bottom left, you see a mini souvenir sheet with 2 stamps. Now the stamps, these stamps from Costa Rica do not have typewriters on them, but I love this souvenir sheet because of the typewriter there in the bottom right-hand corner. Some philatelic purists may say it doesn't count as a typewriter stamp if the typewriter isn't actually on the stamp. But for me, if it's anywhere, including the selvage, then that works for me. And so I love this Costa Rican representation of 2 of its famous national writers, and of course represented by a typewriter. And to the bottom right, you see again 2 poster stamps. Now, I will share with you that a poster stamp isn't postage. It is an advertising piece made to look like a stamp, and it really started in Germany in the early 1900s as a way for manufacturers to talk about and spread the news about their products. Remember, there was no Google, there was no Facebook or Twitter or any of these other things, and they had to get the word out about their new products. And they would create these stamps, many with adhesive on the back, that they could adhere to their envelopes that they would send through the mail to customers. They could have them printed and give them over to stores or other businesses that handle their products so that they could make use of them. And it was a way to get the word out. This blue one here, Reliance Typewriters, comes from good old Montgomery Ward. And that was their version of a typewriter that they sold. And to its right, this is a German poster stamp from about 1913, featuring the calligraph typewriter. Notice that the motto of this particular typewriter up here, Zeit ist Geld, it means time is money. And already they were talking about the typewriter as a time-saving device. Also in this range of materials, there are covers, envelopes. Some of you've seen some. This is this first cover on your left was issued in 2011 by Serbia, and it was to promote the Journalists Association. And I love the cachet showing the typewriter keys on it. We also have cancels in the collection. This fancy or pictorial cancel of one of my favorite typists, that's Snoopy, there at his typewriter with Woodstock looking on. And these stamps were issued in 2018 by Germany. And then below you have a meter strip. This is one of many examples. This is actually from the Dutch East Indies in 1937, and it's a meter strip specimen. That's why you see there's no postage value here in the right-hand side. But again, using the postage in this way to promote the typewriter sales, a Smith Premier typewriter shown here. So finally, in that range, I also have maxi cards and postal cards and ephemera. The maxi card in the upper left is from Italy, issued in 2008. Italy, of course, is home of the Olivetti Typewriter Company, and the stamp commemorated the centennial of the founding of the company, depicted here on this card, but also you notice on the stamp itself and in the pictorial cancel, recreating the look of the stamp with the cancel. Over here to its right is a postal card. The translation here for this advertising card says, "Shorthand learned free of charge by correspondence in a few lessons." And of course, if you were learning shorthand, taking dictation from someone so that you could produce a document, whether that was a letter or some kind of report, your next step would be to type it out on a typewriter, and you see a typewriter peeking through in this left vignette here. And finally, in the bottom right it's actually advertising from a 1935 stamp booklet from Great Britain. And that booklet contained little pages of advertising, and one of them in what's called an exploded booklet. The seller has provided all of the pages. The stamps are no longer there, but these interesting ads were still intact in the booklet. And this particular ad promoted the Remington Home Portable. Notice that the cash price is just shy of 10 pounds in 1935. Today's money, that's about $900 something. So US, that's a lot of money for a typewriter, but these were big innovations, and the average person early on were not able to afford many of the typewriters. Now, you're probably asking yourself at this point, why in the world typewriters? What is that about? Well, we all collect topics for different reasons, whether it's part of our career or we have found a something that we really love, or a hobby, whatever it is. Well, the starting of this collection is right here. Mom's portable typewriter. My mother had this Royal Portable. She bought it and used it at home to produce correspondence, and I saw her type many a letter on this portable, and I was always interested in it. And one summer after my 5th grade in school, I was home, of course, on summer break, and I was bored. And I thought, I'd like to use that typewriter. Well, I found my mother's old high school typing manual. She still had it. And I spent that summer every day going through 2, 3, 4 lessons and typing those lessons out on this typewriter every day through the summer until I taught myself to type. After that, I turned in all of my homework except math. From then on, all of it was typed. And I still have this typewriter. I love it. So once I decided I wanted to collect typewriters on stamps, of course, I was able to find some. And the next question is, well, how many are there? Guess what? ATA has an answer for that. And the ATA checklists come to the rescue. This is a perk of ATA membership. When you are a member, you have access to buy different checklists. ATA offers hundreds of checklists and over 50 topics, and lo and behold, there was a checklist on typewriters. So I bought that right away and began to use that to help me hunt down typewriters. Now, ATA helped me find other information about typewriters, including the fact that the very first typewriter on a stamp was issued in 1935 by Turkey. This information was featured in ATA's handbook called What's First, which shows many different topics and the first stamp in that topic. And I was in a Zoom meeting with an ATA event, and I remember pondering out loud, gee, I wonder what the first stamp is for the typewriters. And somebody sounded off, well, you've got to get this book. What's first? Well, sure enough, there it was. So this particular stamp is a semi-postal, meaning you pay the regular postal rate plus some extra, and the extra goes to fund a particular cause. And in this case, the stamp honors the 12th Congress of the Women's International Alliance that was held that year in Istanbul. And here it is featuring a typist. So let's talk a little bit about the very early typewriter. And let's start by talking about typewriters that wound up not becoming typewriters. We can't have that conversation without talking about this man, an Austrian named Peter Mitterhofer. I love this mini sheet featuring him and one of his inventions with others, not his invention, in the selvage. This mini sheet was issued in 2017. Now, Mitterhofer was born in 1822. And like his father, he was a carpenter. He was a carpenter who loved inventing things, especially inventing tools. So he started tinkering. There was lots of talk out there about machines that would produce type that individuals could use. You didn't have to go to a printer or have a printing press to do this. And he wanted to find a way to create such an instrument that would help other people. And so he started tinkering with that idea, and eventually he created 5 different prototypes of the typewriter. Now, he has become sort of a son of Austria. They're certainly proud of the work that he did, as you can see on the left with this specialty cancel here celebrating his 150th birthday. This is a Tyrolean or cancel in the Innsbruck area. He hailed from South Tyrolean village. It was about 100 miles southwest of Innsbruck. And so that's kind of home base for him. The first version of his 5 typewriter prototypes appears here on this maxi card. This was actually featured in a museum there, and a stamp was issued. You can see in the upper left corner showing this first version. The stamp issued in 1993 was actually his death centenary. And I show it here also as the printer's proof of that stamp. Now, this first version of his 5 prototypes was like the version number 2 and version number 3 made of wood. Because remember, he was a carpenter to begin with, but he realized that he needed to go a little further. And this particular card you can see from the Technology Museum in Vienna, also featuring a special cancel showing that early typewriter. The card also shows on the backside his 5th version, which included metal. Now, this stamp at the bottom here features Emperor Franz Joseph I. This stamp was issued in 1867. Now, he plays an important role, actually, in the future or lack thereof of Mitterhofer's typewriter. You see, he was an early funder of Mitterhofer's work. He was sponsoring Mitterhofer to help him create these different typewriters, but he decided he'd had enough. He lost interest, and by the time that that Mitterhofer got to version number 5, Franz Joseph agreed to buy that typewriter from Mitterhofer, but then the funding stopped. And without those funds, Mitterhofer didn't have the money to continue that work. And so he abandoned his efforts. Sadly, or prophetically, perhaps, he was, if he'd stuck it out a little longer, he could have really made a place for himself. It would be just 5 years later that an American would create a typewriter that would become known to the world as Remington Model 1. And that blew the doors off of the typewriter as a commercial production. So I produced a 1-page exhibit for ATA's annual My 1-Page Exhibit program, all about Peter Mitterhofer, and I titled it, Peter Mitterhofer, the Man Who Almost Invented the Typewriter. This close, yeah. But he wasn't the only one. You can see from this particular cover on the left, it talks about the American typewriter sesquicentennial, and features a typewriter, or it was called a typographer, by U.S. inventor William Austin Burt. He both invented and patented this typewriter in 1829. It was a small wooden box, as you can see from this artist's version here on the right. This box had a swinging single lever that could be depressed, and it made an impression of a letter. So 1 letter at a time was all you got. There was a paper roll inside of the box. Think roll of paper towels. That roll would turn as the message was typed, and then you would tear off the paper and present the message. It took a long time to get a message to anyone using this particular method. Another early typewriter was from 1865, and this one is featured here in this stamp from 2015, featuring from Denmark. It featured, the mini sheet featured 4 Danish inventions, including this writing ball, it was called, by inventor Rasmus Malling Hansen, depicted there in the middle. And he introduced the writing ball, which you see in this picture on the postcard to the right. It contained 52 keys in this semicircular spherical layout. And Hansen was always tooling around with it, trying to make it better. And he would have typists use it and give him feedback, and he would move the keys to places they thought were more convenient to be located, given the language and so on. And another way that he improved it was to employ an electromagnetic battery, and that moved the paper along as the keys struck the paper. It was first exhibited in Copenhagen in 1873, and it was in use in London as late as 1909. People did buy the equipment and they used it. Its failing was that it was handcrafted. I mean, great craftsmanship, but very slow production. And so it was overtaken in the market by the mass-produced American typewriter. It just couldn't keep up with the market demand. That typewriter, the Remington Model 1, was ultimately the invention of Christopher Latham Scholes. He was a newspaper editor turned newspaper owner and then politician. This is the man who invented the QWERTY keyboard, QWERTY. You see those letters in the top row of letters on your keyboard or typewriter. And he was the one who invented this along with a partner, but ultimately he took charge of the project, and eventually he sold the patent for this typewriter. You see the very early version of the typewriter as he invented it on the left here. He sold it to the Remington Arms Company for $12,000. In today's money, that's about $435,000. Pretty good deal for Remington. Now, the thing about the Remington Arms Company is this is a company that knew how to mass produce a product. They'd been doing this for a long time with guns. They had their own tool and die system. They had the manufacturing plants, the facilities, and the workers, and they could turn out these typewriters once they got them going at a fairly quick pace. And of course, that produced a demand, and they were able to keep up with it. This poster stamp here shows that early Remington typewriter as produced by the Remington Company, and you can see as you compare the two, they're very similar. They stuck pretty much to Scholes' design. But let's take a look. This poster stamp was one way they marketed that product, but it wasn't the only way. For example, this postcard was part of a souvenir at the Paris Exposition of 1900. And of course, Remington was there with its typewriter and a full display allowing people to try out the typewriters and of course, take one of these postcards to send it home so that family and friends could see this incredible technology. Remington did use poster stamps to promote its product as the product went global, because of course the demand for typewriters was around the world. And so here again is that original Remington typewriter poster stamp with its motto, "To save time is to lengthen life." In other words, if you use our piece of equipment, you'll have more time to do what you want to do because it'll take less time to communicate the messages you want to communicate. And this version of the poster stamp next to it is the exact same one, but you notice that the writing seems a little different, and that's because this was issued in Hungary to promote the stamp there. And on the right here, the Remington in Great Britain, an Empire product, the Remington noiseless typewriter. And down here at the bottom, the Remington J this is a Swedish poster stamp. It translates: the traveler, the farmer, and the grocer all have great use for the Remington J. So they were beginning to produce typewriters to reach people in ways that anybody might find a way to use them. Of course, Remington wasn't the only typewriter, the only name in the game here. Smith Premier typewriter featured on this wonderful late 1800s cover shows the Smith Premier #2, which created an innovation over the Remington Model 1, and that innovation was a single space bar, as you can see down here. Up until then, the space bar was two separate entities, one on each side, that you might use with the left thumb or the right thumb. And the Smith Premier felt that there would be better consistency and accuracy for typers or typists if they had a single bar. And so that was one of the things that they did. Now, a drawback of this typewriter and all these typewriters in the early stages is that the keys struck in the back. So that meant that the typist couldn't see what they had typed. I mean, they could eventually, as they typed several lines and the paper rolled up, they would eventually begin seeing what they typed, but only 7 or 8 lines later. So if they made a mistake early on, they were well past it by the time they discovered it, because that's how long it took for that line to roll up into view of the typist. Interestingly, Remington eventually fully absorbed the Smith typewriter company. Another competitor was the Monarch, and they brought a great new innovation. And you can see in this logo on this commercial cover that it refers to the machine as the Monarch Visible, because it solved that problem that the early typewriters had. Typists wanted to see what they were typing as they were typing it. Monarch solved that. The type happened right in front of the typist, in the front of the machine, and so the typist could see the keys striking the paper and notice right away if a mistake had been made, so they could either start over or fix it, whatever they chose. And so this began creating a machine that became even more of interest to business folks. And this particular postcard caters to the people to the businesses and to the people who use typewriters. The gal who is the typist here says, "Tired at 3 o'clock? No, sir, I use a Monarch." So it was really talking about efficiency and ease of use. So this visible typewriter and others that came after it really positioned the typewriter to be a highly valuable workplace tool. And of course, the field began to grow. Now, what you see here is just some of what has become a pretty large collection of poster stamps featuring typewriters. You see lots of different typewriters here, and I really love these. I actually have more than 170 poster stamps with typewriters on them now. I found one and I thought, oh, how cool. And then I found another one, and I thought, well, this is great. I'll have this nice little add-on to my collection of these few poster stamps. But the more I looked, the more I found. As a matter of fact, I have got a bid on and one to add to that collection that I hope I will win this week on eBay. So we'll see how that goes. But there are quite a few poster stamps with typewriters on it, and businesses really embraced this way to modernize and talk about their product. So not only did the typewriter change how business was doing business, but it changed how we communicated when wartime came along. And what we see here are examples in two war eras. On the left is this postcard, again featuring an Oliver typewriter, but you notice that what it's really depicting is that this typewriter is small enough and portable enough to be at work on the fields of battle, that it could, that a regiment could establish a field office right on the front lines and be able to use a typewriter to communicate essential war messages right there. This other piece that you see here on the right is also an invention, an innovation spurred on by the typewriter. This is called a typewriter postcard. Now, remember, time is money, right? According to these poster stamps featuring typewriters. So businesses were always looking for ways to shorten the amount of time to get a message on paper and get it out to the recipient. Well, it takes extra time to have this separate piece of paper or two, and then you have to fold it, and then you put it in an envelope, and you lick the envelope, and you put the stamp, blah, blah, blah. It took some time. This typewriter postcard innovated and shortened that process. It was made of a heavier material, heavy enough to be to type on, light and flexible enough to be able to roll into the platen so that you could type right on the card. And it was small, so it was meant for quick, very specific messages. You'd type your message, you'd fold up the bottom half, affix the top and bottom, put your stamp on, and off it would go. And this saves some time. Now, this particular message I found very compelling. This came from a business, a German business, Kulze and Company, United Color Weaving, in the middle of World War II. And this message was provided by the plant manager, who had some bad news about his customer's prospective order. When translated, this reads something to the effect of, "We received your request for an order on May 26th, but unfortunately we cannot promise you delivery as we have no manufacturing instructions for civilians. We are currently only employed to produce products for the Wehrmacht. Heil Hitler." Date of this was 28 January 1943. Now, typewriters played a role for American service personnel in World War II as well, because in a base camp, so often there was a typewriter that could be made available to service people who wanted to type letters home to their family and friends. And so they typed these letters from the theater of war to mothers, sweethearts, and friends, often requesting treats, some kind of comforts of home, and providing news. And this letter does just that. This young man was Chester A. Kiesling, and he wrote this letter to his mother. She was Anna Kiesling of Burlington, New Jersey. And what he was asking for was some of his favorite foods, and he mentions them, but he also shared some important news. He said that the scuttlebutt in his unit was that he might be soon heading home. Well, sure enough, when you look at the postmark of the envelope for this letter, it is August 14th, 1945, which became known as World War II's unofficial ending date. Chet was heading home, and he'd heard it from his buddies. It was the buzz. So communication made possible by the typewriter allowed families far flung in wartime to stay in touch with each other. And communication in the Korean War also helped families feel better about what was happening. This particular letter, typewritten and obviously not typed by, but signed by then Senator Lyndon Johnson, the later President Johnson, was in response to his constituents' concerns that his son might be drafted to fight in the Korean War. And this letter, typewritten letter, allays that constituent's fears and helps him feel better. Notice the close-up here. This is the close-up of the upper right-hand portion of the envelope for this letter. There was no stamp because, of course, then as now, a signature by the legislator is considered franking for in place of a stamp because they received the privilege of free mail. So Lyndon Johnson signed the upper right-hand portion of the envelope so that it could go without to the constituent without a stamp. Now, communication at home also changed because of the typewriter. And in the very early days, it was just an amazing thing if you got to see one. Now, here is a letter from, this is very early, 1883. The letter is dated November 29th of that year. And the letter comes from Isaac Alden Pond. He is owner, as you see in the upper left-hand portion of the envelope. He is the owner of I.A. Pond Groceries and Provisions. And he was sending this letter to his nephew. And he shares some family updates and what have you. But the beauty of this letter for me, and the reason I had to have it for my collection, was that he spends some time in the letter actually talking about the typewriter itself, because this is a newfangled cool thing. And he wanted to tell his nephew about it. And he said, a quote, direct quote from the letter, he says, "This typewriting machine was given to me by Mr. Clarence G. Harmon. It cost $125. I have not written but very little on it, but I think when I get more used to it, I shall like it very much." And as you can see by the close-up in the bottom portion of this slide, this is the bottom of the back side of the letter. That's why you see some type through the letter. It's this ghosted type is from the front side of the letter that's bleeding through to the back. But you can see down here and up here, he has literally tried out every single key on the keyboard. He wanted to try them all and to show his nephew all the cool keys. Now, I also want you to, besides this admonition to his nephew to please write soon, but you'll also notice something else about all of the type you see in this 1883 typewritten letter. And that is that it's all in uppercase, because the very first typewriters, that was your only choice. It wasn't until later innovations that upper and lowercase became an option for typewriter owners. In the beginning, every letter was uppercase. And so this shows a fun example of that very early typewriter. But it also became a way to communicate the typewriter's importance in society. This letter, again from the Monarch Typewriter Company, is actually a sales pitch to a telegraph operator in Massachusetts. And the representative touts the fact that the company has just provided Western Union Telegraph Company 65 Monarch typewriters, Monarch visible typewriters, for use in the San Francisco for their San Francisco operators who, quote, lost their effects in the recent disaster. Note the date of this letter, July 11th, 1906. That's just 3 months after the devastating 1906 San Francisco earthquake and fire, as shown in this early postcard. The Monarch Typewriter Company provided 65 typewriters to allow the San Francisco telegraph operators to have a way to send messages to people in need after this terrible disaster. Typewriters also for businesses became a way to communicate the fact that this business was on top of it technologically. This is picture comes from a book called Technology in the Hospital, Transforming Patient Care in the Early 20th Century. It was published by Johns Hopkins University Press. And the author, J.D. Howell, included this picture that came from an annual report to the Board of Managers of the Pennsylvania Hospital, to their contributors at the annual meeting. And the author makes the case here that this particular picture prominently displays a typewriter in the foreground of this office shot. Why? Because the typewriter was cutting edge. And the message that this hospital was sending is that if we are so cutting edge, even in the office with our office work, imagine how forward-thinking we are in the surgical theater. So as we come full circle and look at how typewriters now appear, we know that the typewriter is, I don't want to say obsolete. You can use it without power. You can use it by candlelight. You can use it where you can't get the internet. There is a place today for typewriters still. On many stamps, typewriters have become to represent social change or innovation. And these 3 stamps show different uses of the typewriter in conjunction with literacy, disabled persons, special education, and so on. Likewise, here is a series of stamps and covers on the left side showing Braille typewriters and focusing on its specific use for people with special needs. This is also depicted in this image on the upper right. This is a postcard showing a specially produced typewriter for a blind World War I serviceman who has lost one of his hands and can only use one hand to type, but he can still communicate using this special typewriter. And in the bottom right, some of the ephemera in my collection includes this wonderful 1984 Spanish lottery ticket. It features a blind person on the typewriter, and the proceeds benefit the National Organization of Spanish Blind People. Typewriters on stamps in more modern times represent authors. And you see a variety of authors here, including in this in the upper left, Samuel Clemens, aka Mark Twain. He is recognized by scholars as the first author to submit a typewritten manuscript. He famously saw the typewriter, plunked down $125 because he thought this was awesome. He bought it and hated it and gave it away. But he submitted, eventually he had other people type for him, but he did not enjoy using the typewriter. So you see many authors featured on stamps, including author of Tales of the South Pacific, James A. Michener here. This particular stamp down here on the bottom left is a Japanese physicist who created a way for the Japanese language to be reproduced in letters that could be typed. and read, so that it opened the language to many, many people. Typewriters have also, I guess I don't want to miss W.E.B. Du Bois, who featured here in a vignette in the bottom portion of the stamp with his typewriter, writer and author, and also co-founder of the NAACP. There were just so many writers whose work is known to us because they were able to type it and produce it for the world. And that is commemorated by many stamps from many parts of the globe. Stamps featuring typewriters or components of typewriters, as we close our talk, also have represented now as a semantic icon in communication. This first stamp from Singapore, issued in 2021, is a set of some of their greetings stamps. I just think this is a happy stamp. A typewriter with the message on the typewritten page, hello. I love that stamp. This next one from Belgium from 2007 was part of a mini sheet featuring 5 stamps showing the evolution of the typewriter. The 5th stamp is actually someone at a computer, but this one is my favorite of the 5, representing romantic communication. It's just a fun stamp. This next one is very, very powerful and really points to the fact that the typewriter innovated a way to preserve literary voice. This is a Polish stamp issued in 1996. It uses a font reminiscent of a manual typewriter to represent the lost literary voice of this particular writer. This stamp reads, take the painful glass out of my eyes, the image of the days when the white skulls are rolled by the burning lakes of blood. This powerful passage was the work of Krzysztof Kamil Basinski. He was a poet and a Polish resistance fighter against German occupation in World War II. Sadly, he was killed at a very young age. He was only 23 years old. He was shot by a German sniper. He didn't have a chance. But his emotive voice, expressed through these words, survived solely because he had the presence of mind to type up all of his poems and give the copy to a close friend who hid them away until after the war and saved this literary voice for the future. And finally, this last stamp on the right, issued in 2020 during the COVID pandemic, is a personal favorite because it features this wonderful old typewriter, and the letters from the keys are just floating off into space. I like to see it as sort of forming this barrier against the COVID pandemic, as the stamp responds with a powerful directive, reescribe su historia. This is a message to write your own story. And to me, that is the most powerful essence of typewriters of all that we've heard today. There is my presentation. Thank you so much.